Welcome back to another episode of the Gifted Performance Podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video and subscribe for future content. For more information about our one-on-one coaching and other training or nutrition options, visit giftedperformance.com. Our newest feature, the Gifted Express, offers premium programming for bodybuilders, powerlifters, Olympic weightlifters, and lifestyle clients for only $30 a month. Enjoy the video, we'll see you on the next one, and as always, stay gifted. Welcome back, another episode of the GPP, Gifted Performance Podcast, giving you knowledge, practical takeaways to improve your own general physical preparedness. Everyone on the YouTubes right now, stop what you're doing. You've seen Matt before. You saw his backdrop before. It was a surfboard. Now it's bodybuilding trophies. He was threatened by the literal dozens of trophies that I have over here. This is a fraction of my winnings over here. I've got so many more. You'll notice that he's done it. You'll notice that Dom has done it. Are you threatened by my bodybuilding excellence? I'm retired, Matt. I'm not a threat to you anymore.
I'm extremely threatened.
I can tell.
Yeah, but do you have a championship belt?
I don't. I never got the belt. And I never got an axe, but I did get
I got
a sword.
that on your turf. On your home turf, I got that.
You came down to my neck of the woods and secured that title right there. I should have
Now
jumped in at the last second.
Now I feel insignificant, so I'm gonna go get like a WWE championship belt and put it on the wall behind me.
There you go.
Shout out to a former client of mine who now works with Annie Gun Show, Pierce, who knocked one of my trophies off of the wall over there. She said a ghost did it, but his legs fell off and his head fell off. So what was one trophy is now 3 trophies. But I don't think you can. Yeah, you can't see that guy back there. All right. But what we're actually here to talk about today is what, Paul? What are we here to talk about today?
Honestly, I don't know. I went to the bathroom when you guys were talking about that.
So we're having Matt on, our first ever 3-time guest. You know why, Matt? Because we get so many shares, so many likes, so many views. We're going to milk you for everything you're worth, and then we're going to toss you to the curb like a chewed piece of bubble gum. We're done with you. You're out of flavor. Let's get the new hottest thing. But for now, the Matt Cusano is the favorite flavor of the week. How does it feel?
I'm going to ride that train for all it's got, man.
So we're bringing on Matt today. We had a little discussion on the last episode about diet breaks, and we said, let's sit down and let's do an actual entire episode about diet breaks. So I want to start things off here. I want to get everyone's definition of a diet break. People classify it very differently. Is it at maintenance? Is it above maintenance? Is it just below maintenance? Is it a week long? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a few days? Is it just a cheat meal? So, Matt, we'll start with you since you're our honorary guest. What is your definition of a diet break, and how do you implement that with your clients?
Well, I think with a lot of what we talk about and a lot of what goes on with coaches, the general answer is going to be it depends. It depends on what the body is needing from that current client. So from my point of view, a singular refeed or a cheat meal it is not going to satisfy what our goal is. The goal of a diet break is understanding that the metabolism has adapted a bit to the deficit and stress of dieting. So we're basically trying to give it a break, whether we call it a diet break or a deload from contest prep, whatever it may be. We're essentially just taking a little break. So in that regard, I don't really look at a cheat meal as being too effective for that. And research has kind of shown that a singular cheat meal isn't very effective for that. I utilize singular cheat meals as a way to reduce cortisol, because, it can spike endorphins and make somebody calm down and feel better. So that does have its place and its benefits, but I don't look at that as a benefit on metabolic function, really. So when I do diet breaks, I'm looking at going from a deficit into more of a maintenance place, definitely not a surplus, because their body, their metabolism has already adapted. their maintenance is going to be lower than what it previously was. So it's really just pulling them out of their current deficit, whatever that may be. It could just be bumping them up 25 to 50 carbs, an extra 200 calories a day, something like that. And at the same time, I might also pull back cardio and training intensity a bit to help with stress and inflammation. So I might hit things from two different avenues rather than just giving them a huge jump in food. It's usually pretty conservative on my standpoint. And from what I've seen most of the time, generally 4, 5, 6 days is usually enough to get a solid response and then go back into a dieting phase. What I haven't done, and we kind of chatted about this before, I've actually never strategically planned in advance diet phases. I adapt to biofeedback. So that's why I have clients checking in as frequently as every single day. And I just base it on if they've stopped seeing results, we need a diet break. If they're seeing results, I'm not gonna jump the gun and put them in a diet break yet. You guys might have a different thought process there. Maybe you can prevent them from ever stalling if you have it implemented ahead of time, but I just haven't thrown that in there just yet.
Yeah, Paul, I think you're more on the proactive side with the diet breaking periods as opposed to the reactive, correct?
I like both, but I do like to do some pre-planning, and I think we all do. Like when we have somebody who has a diet or they need to be a certain leanness by a certain date, we're like, hey, by this point, we kind of want to be in this body weight range probably, and this range, and then maybe here we could fit in a little bit of relief or something like that. But no, I'm a bit of both. I try not to stick to like hard definitions of like, hey, like this is a diet break, this is how you do it, this is when you do it. Like Matt said, and to his point, it's all about the specific scenario and what that individual needs at that time and why you're doing the diet break, right? And so, but, to answer your question directly, I have had limited experience with just saying, like having somebody in prep and saying every 5th week, we're just going to take a diet break.
Yeah.
And it actually worked out really well, and I did like it. Would I do that with everyone? No. I just happened to have been like really familiar with this person, being my now wife, and dieting her for a few different contest preps, and it worked out great. And it's something I would like to do with more people because, I think we can all see from this aspect too, what if you can prevent them from, because once you have the signs that you need a diet break or that somebody is just like, hey, like I'm on the verge of like breaking, you've kind of already pushed them, like, I don't want to say too far, but you've pushed them to that point. Like, why not get to that point? You know what I mean? It's kind of like, why wait until you're beat and thrashed into the ground and to take a deload, right?
Do you think there's a psychological benefit there as well of having those pre-planned diet breaks of like checkpoints? I look at it like it's like one of those video games where if you got to a checkpoint, it like automatically saved your game as opposed to like completely restarting the level. It's like building those checkpoints avoids, Paul, what you were talking about, that like huge binging or them completely breaking and then having to them restart the level or restart the prep all the way at the beginning.
Exactly. No, it was huge, man, because her knowing it was coming, it was like, okay, I can do this for another week or two. Too easy, And then from my perspective as a coach, I'm like, I know I can push you a little harder than I normally would, and maybe we can just get a little ahead and give you some relief and then start that process over, right? And so for her,
gives them a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and for her, by the end of her prep, she was the leanest she had ever been, dieting the longest she ever had, and she was kind of like, I feel like if I had to, I don't want to, but if I had to, I could keep doing this, And how many people finish prep and say that?
I think it's almost the ideal strategy if you know you have a long season planned. If you know you're going to hit a qualifier, maybe there's a gap between your first national show, and if that national show doesn't go well, you're going to have to hit another one in 6 weeks. Like, if that's the plan for the year going in, you almost have to implement these things, because a linear straight through, straight down, calories go down, cardio goes up, that's not sustainable for what's going to be a 36, 38 week dieting period. I mean, it's the same. And if you ask someone the same thing about training, they would say the same. Like, are we just going to progressively overload for the next 36 to 38 weeks? Just keep adding reps, keep adding weight. And people are like, no, that's insane. Well, you can't do the same with your diet. Like, it's the same rules apply there. There's still stressors that needed to be alleviated with these deloading or diet breaking periods, whether it's psychological, whether it's physiological. These things it's a non-starter. It has to be built in at some point.
Yeah.
Dom, I think
to that point, I think that preps, wherever this idea of preps are generally 12 to 16 week, situations, I think that just needs to be thrown out the window. And for the most part, preps should be longer. I think almost everyone, I would say 9 out of 10 people, have an unrealistic time frame for how long it's going to take to get lean, and they also have an unrealistic idea of how much fat they actually have on their physique. And so by creating a very long, smooth prep, you also take away the whole stress of a deadline, So I think there's multiple benefits of just planning a much longer prep in advance with the diet breaks and stuff incorporated in there.
How many times do you think you've asked a client, how much do you think you've had to lose, and they nail the number perfectly?
0.
0.0.
One thing I want to throw out, and going along with what he just said, was for this particular prep, because it was COVID, there was a lot of uncertainty and show dates kept getting pushed back. And so her prep did end up being, I think, pushing 30 weeks or something. It was a very long prep, and that was not the initial plan. But being able to take those diet breaks was not only beneficial psychologically, but it's sort of, I don't know what the right word is, more like artificially or just imposed, sort of, it made us slow down the dieting period, basically, right? And so what we ended up seeing was, she ended up finishing her prep and not doing nearly the amount of cardio that she normally did, or eating as low of food as she normally did, and getting leaner than she ever has. Like, she would maybe do a little bit of cardio, like the week before a diet break, maybe 2 weeks before a diet break. And when I say a little bit, like, maybe like 20 minutes most days. And then there was a point where I was just like, I don't even think you need this cardio. And so I didn't have her do any like machine cardio. I had her keep her steps up around 8 to 10K a day. So that is a decent amount of activity for sure. Yeah. But then she didn't do any real cardio again until like 3 or 4 weeks out. Yeah.
Sorry, my dogs are going wild. Dom, I want to throw one to you. I'll let you answer the first question first. I'll tolerate it. And then I want you to speak a little bit to what are some of the adaptations outside of like stress or cortisol that occur during a diet, and maybe what are the time frames that those occur over. So an example might be like thyroid downregulation during a diet. You usually see that downregulation in the first couple weeks of the dieting. So that might be an example. But first, what's your definition of a diet break?
Well, probably the same as both of these guys.
Come on, say something different. Just like, my version of a diet break is,
well,
I let people go
I'll
to
do
Universal and they eat like turkey legs.
I feel like I give more cardio breaks than I do diet breaks. Like, I probably will tell somebody to not do their cardio for the week more than adding food back for a couple days. Or I'll give them like no cardio for the week and just like 3 high days in a row, and like make sure those high days are way over their maintenance, and then that's it. So it's not like a extended like week of high calories with no cardio. But I feel like because periodically I'll tell people like, hey, cut your cardio in half or don't do any this week. I feel like doing those in like small increments throughout prep stop me from having to do like a full week of food or things like that. But I like doing that. And I think actually clients enjoy it more. I feel like I have way more clients that hate the cardio more than the dieting.
I think it can go both ways, but I think you bring up a good point. You know, maybe a better terminology is a deficit break over a diet break. So one way or another, we're changing the deficit, whether it be through activity or, you know, food intake. But that's really the end goal, is changing the deficit, not so much how much they eat or how much they burn, you know?
What do you think causes more internal stress, a hard food deficit or a high calorie activity deficit?
I would say the activity is more damaging if we're going to use the terminology. So like if I know somebody is really adapted and not responding, I'll pull all possible stressors and just rely on dieting to continue seeing results. And I've had a lot of success with that. I've had girls 4 weeks out of national shows doing zero cardio, only lifting 3 times a week, zero PEDs, pulling all total accumulated stress, but I'll focus just on the dieting aspect and we'll still see results.
Well, I think that I'm sure a lot of us have maybe seen this at some time, where it seems like when you strongly rely on activity and cardio to be the driver of fat loss, things don't really work out as cleanly. It's almost like, hey, the bulk of our deficit, and I think, Ryan, you said this to me years ago, like the bulk of your deficit should be probably from the diet, you know, and then the cardio and the activity, you're just kind of tapping on the gas a little more, right?
Yeah. So I've always been of the belief that the majority of the fat loss, the impetus for fat loss, of what's actually driving it, is going to be from the diet, and the cardio is merely an accelerant. So yeah, like stepping on the gas. Like if you step on the gas and you really apply that cardio, that larger deficit, if you let go of the gas, like the car is going to keep moving. Fat loss is going to keep moving along because the deficit from the diet still exists. It's going to slow down over time. The car is going to slow down over time because your metabolism is adapting, but you're going to continue to see incremental fat loss even with the removal of cardio. If you remove cardio and fat loss completely stops, then you need to take a look at the deficit that's being created by the diet, because it's not large enough.
Yeah, I think that goes with the saying, you can't out-train a bad diet.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you can't do cardio so much to drive that deficit, which you even see like with people cheating and then trying to do an extra 500 calories of cardio the next day to, you know, fix it, for lack of better terms. But I think that's a good point, because that is something that a lot of people don't understand. They think they can do more and more and more cardio when really they're probably just stressing their body out, over revving that engine way too much. And eventually, once those RPMs are constantly high, your engine burns out.
Yeah, too much systemic stress, and then the RT3 is through the roof, and then, you know, you're not seeing any results.
Yeah, and then we also have to think about recovery, but I almost look at it as we still probably in most circumstances want some increase in activity, and we almost want to look at maybe the cardio as what actually it's intended to be from like a fitness standpoint, and giving you like the tools to efficiently use fat as fuel and things like that.
Like, I think I had one of the best fat loss. Sorry, go ahead.
What's that? Go ahead, Dom.
No, I was going to say, I think I had one of the best fat loss phases when it was with Paul. It was when we focused on steps and food, and cardio didn't come in until like the last 3 weeks of that fat loss phase. I think just increasing NEAT by itself has such a big impact on it. Even now, like I've moved from a condo to a house and my steps have almost doubled, and I'm eating a lot more than I probably would have been in the past, probably because my NEAT is just higher.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to say the same thing. Even if I'm pulling all cardio, I still make sure that they're getting their steps in, and I'll almost always have clients doing calming outdoor walks after meals, whether it be 5 or 10 minutes, something like that, to help with that process. So, yeah, I mean, activity still has to be there, obviously.
I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Ben House. He's a really good one. We might want to have him.
Dr. House, like the TV show?
Yeah, Dr. House. But Ben, and he was talking about like the difference in appetite regulation with kind of NEAT versus added in cardio. And I'm not an appetite expert, so I can't like speak to his point. And you'd be better served to watch the episode of Iron Culture that he was on. But it seems like that low intensity NEAT, getting your steps in, actually has a positive impact on appetite regulation versus just going to the gym, doing like 15 minutes of like HIIT and then being done. There's some sort of interaction there with gut hormones that he was talking about, and regulating appetite. So some interesting stuff there. And it seems like, Matt, from what you're talking about, you've seen it in practice as well.
Yeah, for sure.
What's interesting here is the four of us, because I do something similar. None of us actually take people out of the deficit. We lessen the deficit by either reducing cardio or, like Matt said, maybe just adding, 25 to 50 grams of carbs, increasing calories by 100 to 200. But none of us actually remove the deficit, whereas it's pretty common, at least in the literature, for the deficit to be completely removed. The individuals are put back at maintenance. So what have you heard people talk about, or what do you theorize people are getting at when other coaches are getting at when they bring calories all the way up to maintenance? Are they trying to combat some of the metabolic adaptation? Is it a psychological thing?
Is that based on a weekly deficit or like a daily deficit?
Weekly. So that would be, what I've seen most is, anywhere from like 1 to 2 weeks at maintenance, at new estimated maintenance.
Yeah, because when I do those back-to-back high days, like if I do 3 or 4 high days in a row for somebody, they're pretty over maintenance. They're at least 500 cals over. And the reason I do that is because we could see in literature, if we could get a good enough leptin response from that food, we can see a little bit of upregulation in thyroid output. So if they're, not on HRT thyroid and they're just, a natural competitor, if I can try to stimulate a little bit more thyroid response to come back from the extended dieting, it's usually better seen when food's a lot higher. So that's probably why you see people do that.
Well, I'm not necessarily against doing more food. I think it just depends on the situation. But to that point, it's recognizing what would be their new maintenance level of cows, because their metabolism has adapted. You can't go off of what their maintenance cows was 12 weeks ago. It's going to be lower now. So, even a slight pull out of the deficit is going to be beneficial, because generally what I do is, like I said, it's usually a combination of both pulling the cardio and adding in some food. So we might be pulling 100 calories from cardio plus adding 200 calories. So then it's 300 calories a day. But my biggest thing is, it also depends on timeline. I'm not trying to take 5 steps back in regards to their progress. So I'm careful with how much food I give them. I'm giving them just enough to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, but not necessarily overfeed them too. So that's kind of my thought process with that.
I want to throw, because I've had this, I've said how I like to do diet breaks with people, and I've gotten the response of, well, that's not a break. They're not at maintenance, right? And that's why I don't like to put hard definitions on things, because what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to reduce stress, some sort of stress, whether that be psychological stress or, stress to maybe their metabolism. But I'm not even sure we have really good evidence to suggest that we are actually getting a sustainable improvement in their metabolism, right? But, for myself, I think a lot of us have maybe taken a more conservative route because we're afraid, right? Like we're afraid to lose too much time on a prep or whatever. But what I've sort of found is it still accomplishes the goal, right? And for myself, I look at it, I go into a diet break, like if we get some cool metabolic effect or whatever, that's great. But my main goal is like making sure the person survives and that they accomplish their goal and they actually get there, right? So for me, a lot of it is psychological based. And so as long as we add enough food to do that, to keep them going and feel like that they can just keep doing this and reach their goal, then I'm happy with that. And so a lot of times what I will personally do is whatever their deficit is, I'm like, hey, I want to increase your calories by 10% of your estimated new maintenance, right? And I'll just sort of watch that over like 3 days. I'll have them do a midweek check-in. And I'm like, cool, what happened with your weight? You lost weight? That's really cool. So we have room to add a little more food. Let me add in 3 to 5% to finish out this week. And if they have enough time, maybe we go 2 weeks, right? Or if they've been dieting for a long time and they're not in a prep and it's like, hey, we can just take 2 weeks, let's keep increasing food and maybe work towards maintenance. But if we're in a circumstance where we can only afford to take a week, or maybe they're in a prep and we do that week and it's like, I increase your food, you feel better, you feel like you can go back to dieting and you're ready for this. That's great. That's what I wanted. But if we also still happen to have lost a pound or two, even better, we didn't lose any time, right? And that's shown me that you can keep dieting on more food than what I had you at before, right? So
Yeah,
I mean, to me, it's still a win. Yeah,
that's a great point. And that's why I do the same thing. Everything I do is not set in stone. It's very adaptive. So the same thing. If I'm cutting cardio or increasing food, I want to see biofeedback in the next 24 to 48 hours to see what the body's response was to that change. And to your point, if they're losing weight, eating more food, why would I stop the diet break? I would just keep allowing that process to occur. Maybe I never put them back into a deficit. Maybe we are reverse dieting into a show for the next 6 weeks and they're eating 300 carbs, losing weight into the show. It happens all the time. So that's why it's just depends. It might be, I'm going to feed them up as much as I can until they start gaining weight. Once I start seeing a negative impact from higher food and less cardio, I'm going to switch back to a deficit to keep our progress going. So that's kind of how I go about it. I don't have a set calories or anything. It's just very case dependent.
Two things. First of all, the people who come at Paul and they say it's not a break if you still have them in a deficit, it's not a break. When you have a break at work, do you leave work?
Right.
Checkmate right there. You're still at work, you dumb motherfucker. The second part is, Tom, you like that one? Yeah. Right up there. Had a lot of coffee this morning. All right, the second part is, Matt, I'd actually like to hear your input on what Dom said about kind of getting a little bit of thyroid upregulation from that diet break period, and if that's something that's even worth it. Because if the thyroid then adapts in another 1 to 2 weeks, and you just took a 1 to 2 week diet break, did you just trade 2 weeks at maintenance for the 2 weeks of how long it's going to take for your thyroid to adapt again? Are there other pieces that we're not thinking about there? What would be your take on that?
No, I mean, giving the thyroid some love is obviously going to be beneficial. Going back into a deficit, there's going to be adaptation yet again. But hopefully, if you are taking a step or two back, you're taking 2 steps back for 5 steps forward. So hopefully, it does end up benefiting you in the end, one way or another. But to that point, I'm usually not solely focused on food to support thyroid and hormone adaptations. I'm also looking at throwing in some zinc, some iodine, some minerals, vitamins and stuff to help that process as well with the carbs titrating up. So hopefully I can kind of prolong that thyroid love a little bit longer, but I think it's safe to say that it's inevitable that things are going to downregulate again if you go back down into a deep deficit. And it's not so much that we're trying to avoid that, it's just that we are aware of it, and so we know how to adapt in the future.
I almost see dieting as like jogging in a wind tunnel, where the wind slowly gets faster and faster as you go along. And then like there's this track off to the side where you can step off and you don't have that wind in your face anymore. So you step off for your diet break, you kind of recharge yourself. And when you jump back into the diet's still going to be hard. The wind is still going to be blowing in your face. But what you've done is you've revitalized yourself. You've rested your legs. You've built up your energy. You've hydrated. And now you can kind of persist and continue going in the face of what is still a pretty strong headwind.
Yeah.
Dude, where do you come up with this shit?
I tell you, I like sit up, I like rocket out of bed at like 5:15 in the morning. I'm like, I gotta write this
wind
down.
tunnel?
A wind tunnel, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, this is you just reminded me when you said 2 steps back to hopefully take 5 steps forward. There was one particular diet break in her prep where she was fairly close to, we finally have a show date and we finally have a target. And I can't remember if it was 6, 8, 10 weeks out, but it was pretty close. And I was like, you know what? You've been dieting for a long time. Let's go big on this diet break. And I gave her a substantial amount of food. And instead of my normal process of here's 10% more food and let's inch it up over the week, or this one was actually 2 weeks. I was like, let's go big. And she put back on a good bit of weight. I can't remember how much. I think it was like 6, 7 pounds. And I was terrified the whole time. I was like, this is going to end in disaster. I was like, this is not good. And then, but at the end of the 2 weeks, though, I pulled her food. I think 10 or 15%, like what I would do for the standard person starting a diet over again. And by the end of that week, or maybe a couple days into the week after, she was hitting new lows again, like new PR lows for that contest prep. And yeah, I just thought that was super neat, because I think a lot of us are afraid to see that happen on a diet break.
Well, and that goes back to the deadline. Like I said before, the deadline stresses the athlete, but something that never really gets talked about is how much does a show deadline stress a coach and cause a coach to question his or her decisions. If I don't have a deadline, I'm making much more rational decisions. But if we're 4 weeks out, I'm questioning everything.
I have a rule. And whenever this is something that, like, whenever new coaches ask me, that just advice for coaching or any kind of mentorship, I'm like, whatever decision you made, for this week, stick to it. It doesn't matter like what happens. Like you need data and you need time to see that happen. And I'm like, don't do crazy shit like 2 days into whatever decision you made and pull back on it, do something different, keep changing things, because that's where you just end up with a huge mess. Yeah. So I went into that 2 week thing and I was like, this is what I'm doing. Right.
Yeah. I think something that we haven't really touched on yet too is the performance benefit of increasing food and dropping that cardio. Their training's going to improve. Their if their strength declined a little bit, it might come back a bit. And so, improving their performance in their workout can also then catapult their progress as well. Because obviously we know that, as you get deeper into a dieting phase, your training quality is going to decline a bit.
And I see that more. I see that more in my male clients than I see in my women, where guys will be like, I feel like I'm getting weaker, and it's like this huge catastrophe that they stress about. So again, if you can throw them in a diet break, kind of refill up glycogen, give them a little bit of give their legs a little bit of a break from all the cardio. They start feeling a little bit stronger. All of a sudden, they're not stressing as much. They go back to the diet and they feel stronger. So therefore, they train stronger, as opposed to this continued drop off in performance.
I think a caveat worth mentioning here with diet breaks is we obviously have to trust the client is following the diet in the first place. We do have clients here and there where maybe they're not 100% on their diet year round, but then there's also those clients who you give them a little bit of extra food and they might go a little too crazy with that. You give them an extra 25 carbs, before you know it, they had a burger. So, that's part of it too, is you guys have to be in a really solid relationship and trust that little bit of break that you're giving them is all that they're doing,
It's funny you say that, because what really sucks about being a coach sometimes and that happening is that, of course, the client doesn't tell you in the middle of the week when you can fix it. It's like they wait all the way until Sunday, and now we have real problems to fix.
Yeah.
So here's kind of a tangent off of this. In the scope of a contest prep that includes logical diet breaking periods, what is the role of something like a refeed day or a cheat meal? If you are taking those diet breaks within kind of the entire plan, do we still need to be taking refeeds? Do we still need to be taking cheat meals? And maybe we just differentiate between those two. The old burger and fries.
Well, I think the cheat meal thing is, one, you probably see some coaches do it thinking it's going to do what a diet break does. And then two, some people might do it just because psychologically the athlete just can't handle it anymore. Right. But for me, for example, with dieting, most of the time I do some sort of carb cycling. So I don't find myself in those situations where I constantly need to add food back or do diet breaks because every couple of days they're having a refeed. And what that's allowing me to do is really push a deficit for a couple of days in a row, feed back up, and then push a deficit again, feed back up. And I kind of like that approach because, one, it gives something mentally for the client to look forward to. They get through their 3 days and then they know, oh shit, yeah, I have a high day coming up. They have the high day. They feel re-energized, whether it's mental or not. They feel good to push another 2 days. And then they know, again, they have another refeed, for example. I probably use way more refeed days, high days, than I do diet breaks.
I think the cheat meal is strictly psychological most specifically for people who don't enjoy dieting and don't enjoy eating clean. There's people who just expect a free meal every single week, not for any type of scientific reasoning or even a metabolic reasoning. It's nothing like that. They just don't want to eat the same thing over and over again, and they really want that donut or that burger or something like that. They're very, food focused, if you will. So I think that's really the only time where an actual cheat meal would be utilized if they're about to break, if they're psychologically about to break.
See, but I could make the counter argument that every time I've given a cheat meal to that kind of client, it turns into a 2 to 3 day binge.
No, you're not wrong.
You know what, guys? Fuck you. Don't take away my cheat meal. When I'm lean, my metabolism's on fire and I can feel it.
Churning and burning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm always scared to give cheat meals, because I've had such bad experience in the past. You know, it took one guy to ruin it for everybody, right? Like, I can't feel the confidence to give somebody, go have whatever you want to eat, without in the back of my head knowing that they go out to eat, they come home, and then it keeps going.
Well, especially me, as I get more and more focused with gut health, it's like, even if I wanted to give you that food, we know that you're going to, have a bunch of inflammation and digestive issues from whatever you're choosing. And that's going to set us back like an entire 7 to 10 days of prep. So, when I've done it with clients nowadays, I actually get a lot more specific. There's obviously going to be something safer than others. A pizza and ice cream, I'm never going to allow that to be used.
See, here's where I'm going to push back, Matt. Last year, fantasy football, week 9, I scored the least amount of points. So I had to eat 9 McFish sandwiches. After I finished my 9th, I ran a sub 7-minute mile. Explain. How did I do something like that? Fueled on tartar sauce.
You wanted to puke, so you tried to run a faster.
Wrong answer. The only correct answer is built different. Paul, what were you going to say?
So I love this conversation about cheat meals because, and we probably all have. We've all been clients before, right? And I remember I had this coach that every 10 days I would get a refeed meal. And he was like, yeah, just be responsible. Get a burger, fries, maybe Sundae cone. And it was never that, right? I would just go off the rails, right? And, maybe, I forgot to weigh in for a couple days. And that's always a giveaway for me when I check a client sheet and I see I'm like, oh, you're always great about your weigh-ins. You missed 2 or 3 weigh-ins, right? And you're like, something's not right here. And I remember when I met Ryan was very early into me becoming a coach, and I asked Ryan to coach me, and he gave me all my diet stuff. And I think Ryan has very different views on apparently by this podcast and us working together, he has different views. But back then I looked at my sheet and I was like, oh, I have actual macros for my refeed. And he was like, yeah. And he was like, but also don't take them. Right. And I was like, what do you mean? I can't diet without a cheat meal or a refeed. And it blasted my mind. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. How am I going to survive this? And Ryan was just like, you don't need them. I was like, do you want this diet to take longer? And he was like, it's just going to take longer if you start taking all these super high calorie refeeds and, and you binge and all that stuff. And so that was like my first diet where I actually didn't take any high days or refeeds. And I was like, wow, like this went way better than I thought it would. And I actually transformed my mindset from I have to do this every week or every couple weeks to like, I actually don't need this. Like people are just telling themselves they need it. But like you absolutely can get through a whole diet, lose a significant amount of weight, get really lean without any high days or cheat meals or refeeds. And these things can be good if used strategically and implemented, but they can also slow things down, right? And they can have potentially negative effects as well if not used well.
Now, I will say kind of as a counter to that, and this will be like my only counter, because I 100% agree with everything you guys are saying. Back to that, psychological, food-focused individual, if let's say they do follow everything and you restrict them for 16 to 20 weeks, that post-show rebound might be really, really bad. Because now they've made a list of every single restaurant and every single meal that they have to eat in a matter of 48 hours post-show. And it becomes like a challenge. It's a slippery slope. Sometimes you kind of have to compromise and give them that one meal at 10 weeks out so that they follow a perfect reverse. It's kind of like weighing your options and working with each individual client the best you can. But 100%, they don't need it. It's just like,
no, I'm 100% with you. There's so many benefits to having some sort of relief period when it comes to any of this training, food, like any sport, So yeah, definitely, I can see that.
And some people, it can also hinder their relationships because, that they might go out on a date night with their significant other once a week or something like that. And then in prep, they've now gone, 8 weeks without that date night. And plus between PEDs and training and stuff, things are getting kind of tough at home. So at that point, it might actually relieve a lot of stress to allow them to do that.
No more date night. You guys get walks together so you can get your steps in.
Yeah.
That's a date night now.
You know what I'll tell people too, like when I'm telling them about the steps and what I want them to do, I'm also like, by the way, this could be an opportunity to talk more to your significant other than you have in like the past 6 months. Because like, like you're just fucking there walking, and a lot of people end up, they're like, yeah, like, damn, I didn't realize how much we didn't talk through like a normal day.
Yep.
Not to change the subject too much, but I getting back to your point, Paul, I think that I see the importance of diet breaks and refeeds as later on in the diet kind of thing, as opposed to early on when body fat is higher. I think it's safer to lose at a faster rate, especially for enhanced individuals. It's a lot safer to lose when you have higher body fat, and then you can kind of pepper in the refeeds and the diet breaks later on in the diet when body fat starts to get lower and when you want to slow down the rate of loss anyway. That's how I've always operated there. And I think it does well for the psychology of the client. Early on in the diet, they see, oh, I'm losing, 2 pounds a week. That's awesome. I'm really stripping the fat. At the end of a diet, when psychologically they're off the rails, they see a 2 pound loss and they're like, oh, it must be 100% muscle. I must be losing nothing but muscle. It can't be any fat at this point.
It's funny. I think that's a fine approach. I think it's a really good one. And, I do like to cover some ground first. I definitely don't want to get in there and like 3 weeks in, we've only lost 4 pounds and we're just like, all right, we're taking a break,
Right.
But also I don't think it like hurts, to have some early-ish into the diet, and just kind of going back to the whole, why wait till we have problems? Like why break the machine first? Like, isn't it better to not have to fix the machine and just do its maintenance and keep it running? No, yeah, I think there's utility in both approaches, and your approach, because I've seen you as a coach, like I know it's a good approach because you're really good at getting people on stage in good condition, and that's kind of like you keep that at the forefront and you make sure that you get a good bulk of work done first, right?
I accept.
I think it also depends on the what their off season was like. Did they come to you at 16 weeks out for a prep, which is what a lot of people do, or did you actually work their off season with them, work at building their metabolic rate, and get lab work, make sure that their hormones are optimized before starting a prep? I think all of those really play a role too. If they had just competed 3 months ago, then at 4 weeks into prep, they might need a diet break already because they didn't even have time to fix the adaptations from last prep. So, I wouldn't even do a prep with someone in that situation, but we all are put in those situations and we know it. So I think that plays a role too.
If you are an athlete who wants a shorter preps as your career goes along, it's in your best interest to stay with your current coach long term so that you can build that relationship. The first prep that you do with a coach is going to be your longest. You need to learn how each of you operates. Your coach needs to learn how you respond, whether it's to PEDs, to the diet, to cardio, to training, all of that. You stay with your coach, learn from each other. Each prep gets easier, shorter, and more productive.
Absolutely.
Here's our last little diet break question here. Are there athletes, either from a psychological or a physiological sense, that you've seen, that you've worked with, where diet breaks were just, it couldn't happen? It wasn't something that you were going to implement with an individual?
Yeah. Ryan is like that. Zaris.
Ryan's too dialed in.
He's psychologically so dialed in that if I suggested we needed a diet break or refeed, it was the most pushback I'd get. Like, that's why I believe in that all-in mentality can really hurt a prep too, because so he was just, let's go. The second I got him to like consider doing a high day, he took the high day, he gained like 14 pounds the next day. And it was just because he was so depleted that he just had every retention issue you could have. From like only like 300 grams of carbs, but he just pushed so hard for too many weeks that got us nervous for his carb up. What's going to happen when we carb you up?
I was going to say, do you think there's possibly a role there with the peak for nationals? Because he came out of the qualifier with that same standard Zaris mentality of like, all right, we got X amount of days, let's go even harder for these days.
Yeah, I think what happened with that was we thought he was going hard enough to where he was just as depleted as before his qualifier. So we treated it the same, but he probably wasn't as depleted as we had thought. So that's what caused that overshoot and for him to spill. But that's where I think, like, with some clients, it's hard to give them a diet break because mentally they think they're not moving anymore because, they're not dieting. They're not doing cardio. They're not doing those things that they think they should be doing in that moment. That mentally, I think for some guys and girls, it might throw them off track, if anything. That it takes them some time to get the mentality back that, okay, now it's time to push. Like, it's okay to let off gas.
I try not to even say the word diet break anymore. I just say, hey, these are your macros this week, and this is what I'm doing with cardio. Like,
Jedi.
I don't even
Jedi level.
Yeah, I don't even say diet break anymore because of the pushback. And if I do get pushback, I'm like, it's okay. Like, this is just 1 week out of many. We're going to get right back to it, Basically what I'm saying is if like somebody gives me pushback, I don't care. Like, I don't care what you think.
I'm not as ruthless as you.
But what I will say is, I'm sorry, Matt, last thing. But what I will say is, for sure there are some people that shouldn't, or I don't want to say shouldn't. It's tough to want to give them the diet break because of what you said, Matt. They will go overboard and they'll do stuff they're not supposed to do.
Yeah, it's got to be a trust thing. And my athlete Tom, who won Junior USA's, he's very much like that. He went 5.5, 6 months without a cheat meal. He doesn't like them. Like, I would bring it up to him, and he'd be like, honestly, I'd just rather more rice and oatmeal. So he was very, very meticulous, and he didn't want to skew anything. He's all about consistency, sleeps the exact same time every day, eats at the exact same time every day, drinks the same exact water every day, and he just nails that consistency. So he didn't like the idea of variables, but he is extremely coachable. And so with my approach of, like I said, not planning ahead, but rather adapting to the scenario, it's easier to get them to buy into a diet break because, we're doing it because they're not seeing results. So then it's just like, well, we could either keep doing what's not working, or we could try this and see if it works. And that usually is just like, okay, yeah, that works. And usually, because we're doing biofeedback during the diet break, they're seeing that it's helping. And after they've seen it work once, they're all about it moving forward.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So it's really just it's an initial buy-in. Once you show them that it works.
I try to avoid it with, it's more times than not, it's female clients. Like, you guys have worked with those female clients who like come to you and they're like, I want to do a contest prep because I saw my friend do it, and they've been like lifting weights for like 6 months and don't have a single like ounce of muscle on their body, and you're like, okay, here we go, let's cross our fingers and hope this somehow goes well, and you have to diet them like super hard. I'll try to avoid the diet breaks with them, because with hunger being out of control, with their response, it's just going to be an absolute nightmare of weight gain, stress. With that, I'll usually just pull the cardio for a week or two and go from there. But yeah, I think the worst peak I ever had is when I did the Zaris approach. I did a qualifier show. I looked pretty solid. I was like, I'm going to go so hard these next 2 weeks. I'm going to show up. And then I just ate like a rice cake and was just absolutely blown out water buffalo for the next 3 days. Like, all right, well, here we go. Here goes nothing.
It's funny you say that with like first-time competitors, and I could maybe even, if somebody said this, I'd be like, well, it's not an awful point. You guys remember your first like hard diet? It was your most motivated, and you could just. I remember mine. I hired a coach and I did my first diet ever. We dieted for a year straight,
Nice.
and like literally half a pound to a pound a week for a year straight. 13 months actually. And I could not do that today, right? So yeah, I don't know.
That goes into it too. First time dieters, the adaptation is not going to happen so quickly. So you can run a first time dieter into the ground and it's going to go okay. Like, you can diet them unbroken for 16 weeks usually, and they're going to keep losing. But it's usually that second year, third year, those multiple preps where the adaptations have accumulated, that's where it really needs to be more utilized. But I always say, novice competitors are pretty much the easiest, because you just keep dropping their food and up in cardio and their body will respond.
And the best thing is they don't have anything to compare the experience to, so they're just flying blind. They're like, hey, I feel like this. You're like, oh, that's normal. You're fine. Just keep going. Just keep going. You're fine.
Totally normal.
But then you inherit that client, right, from some other coach, and you start their diet, and they're like, why are we not doing 30 minutes of cardio every single day, and why are my calories so high?
Right.
And you explain it to them, and then they drop their calories and start doing cardio anyway.
Carbs to get shredded. 0 carbs.
All right, Matt, let's wrap this thing up. We were talking about it before we started recording, but I didn't get the full spiel. I had to step away. Bring us up to speed on the state of the master classes. What was the last one, and what do you guys have planned for future classes? And anyone who is interested in those links are always in the description of these videos, by the way.
Yeah, so our last class that recently happened was part 1 of the comprehensive blood work. And so basically we went over an entire panel, and we went over the majority of things that you'll see on a comprehensive lab panel. We compared the normal ranges given on blood work to what we believe are optimal ranges, which been shown in research. We explain to people why it's important to not just pay attention to normal ranges, but rather look at the optimal ranges. We also gave some insight on some common reasons we see suboptimal readings in each individual department. And then we also talked about symptoms in comparison to lab work, because sometimes people are very fixated on the numbers. But, lab work is very accurate, but symptoms are equally important. I've seen multiple lab works where it looks absolutely perfect, that all their numbers look great. But when I look at their symptoms on an intake form, it's screaming imbalances and issues. So we have to kind of pay attention to both of those, and we went over all of that. Part 2 is going to be happening next month in October. And part 2 is going to be more of a deeper dive into addressing those suboptimal situations and how to improve those things, whether it be through lifestyle changes, diet changes, potentially supplementation, stuff like that. And we're going to have a couple case studies to show, circumstances of the past. And something that we often do in the courses is we usually test individuals at the end to make sure they have a really good grasp of that knowledge. So we'll probably have some hypothetical case studies for everyone to take part in as well, to make sure that they, really understand the whole thing. Obviously, something we've talked about in here too. We do have a disclaimer that we are not doctors, and there is a separation between, what's in a coach's realm and what's in a doctor's realm. And so, the things that we're touching on are more so the common issues we see, and not trying to remove the fact that sometimes physicians do need to get involved.
Physicians, meh. And then I saw you had another one that you posted up as well. Like you were going into a little bit more of the nutritional realm. You were starting with a macros masterclass.
Yeah, so I think we're also going to be doing a macros masterclass. That's more so focused on Gentry side of things. She works a lot more with lifestyle clients. So that one's going to be, tailored to lifestyle clients, or maybe, new up and coming coaches who are still trying to get a gauge on formulating a diet for an individual and stuff like that. But we're going to talk about nutrient timing, and quality of foods, not replacing rice with donuts specifically, and how, processed foods don't necessarily give us the same benefit as whole foods. So we're looking at doing that as well. We have a couple others in the works down the road. I've had a huge demand for a gut health course, so we'll definitely be doing that. I do have a metabolic adaptations course that I want to go over to help guide people on appropriate reverse dieting out of a show or out of a diet phase, because that's something that seems to be, there's a lot of misleading information about that. So those are the ones that are upcoming in the next couple months too.
Nice. And I think what's most impressive about these masterclasses is the amount of information that you're packing into that, 90 to 120 minute little spiel that you do there. So, I mean, you're looking at all the coaches that are listening to this, the exercise science majors, you're getting your exercise science degree here from Professor Matt in a nice, condensed, easy to understand and apply form. So you're doing the Lord's work here.
I appreciate it. And that's our goal. We try to give as much information as we can to obviously make it worthwhile. And, we want people to walk away feeling like they have a mastering of the topics that we go over. So that's definitely the goal.
Right on. Paul, Dom, anything you want to leave the people with?
No, you should sign up for Matt's class.
Most definitely. Dom, what do you call a fake noodle?
A foodle? I don't know.
An impasta. All right, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe for that one right there. We will see you on the next one. In the meantime, stay gifted, folks.
Bye.
See you guys.